pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First order of business, we don't have any minutes, but we do have comments from Jen about the outstanding contribution that the Trails of North Andover have been doing.
So,
Okay.
if you haven't seen or haven't received in your inbox the fall newsletter from the North Andover, Friends of North Andover Trails, they've sent out their newsletter which highlights the things they've done this year, which includes the new bridge at Mazarenko Farm, which has been lacking for some time now. 2 neighborhood trails at Mazarenko Farm and Rays Pond Conservation Area. Their kiosk project is finished, so we have new kiosk signs at each of the conservation areas. And we have a Eagle Scout project of a new kiosk at Osgood Hill and a new Bog Ridge Trail at Mazarenko Farm, unrelated to the big stream crossing, which was done as well. So all nicely highlighted in the Friends of North Andover Trails newsletter, if anyone hasn't seen it or received it. If I didn't forward it to you all, I will, but.
Is that information included in the booklet of trails that they publish?
Nope, so they have the trails booklet out. It's for sale at the town. It's for sale at different establishments throughout town.
Right.
And if you're interested in that, you can definitely purchase it.
Do we have a link on our website?
To them,
To the-
yes,
so they can-
most definitely.
So their newsletter comes up.
Yep.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you.
Actually, I should see if it posts to the town website, but if it doesn't, I will make sure there's a link to the newsletter on our site as well.
Okay,
But there's a link to their website where you can get to the newsletter.
got it.
Okay, we'll start off with 83 Old Farm Road, RDA.
So at the last meeting, you asked that Old Farm go back to the drawing board. Okay, I don't know how to make this. And present a revised fence plan that showed a buffer zone related to the wetland. And so before you tonight, which is going to be infinitely fun, because I have to cast and uncast it to make it present. He was not anticipating needing a plan. Here's the plan. And you have it, actually, I think you have a copy in your packets, no?
We don't have the revised, we have the original.
The problem with relying on technology. That's the new plan. So hopefully you can see from what's presented on the screen, because without...
Would it help if I gave a quick overview of what
You
I
can
was
give an
thinking?
overview. I'm just going to have to keep, every time I wanted them to see a different viewing of it, I'm going to
Okay.
have to recast it. So here is what is now proposed.
So what I tried to do was submit a new plan that, at the advisement of the committee, had a average buffer zone of at least 10 feet from the wetlands that was delineated by the wetlands engineer. And this also includes removal of the shed, which was also advised by the committee. So Jen and Heidi came out and took a look at the property. We kind of flagged and planned out the revised mock-up for the fence, and that's indicated here by the black lines.
I like your plan.
Thank you for, listening. Thanks.
The shed's gonna be removed completely off the property?
Yes, I figured that was the easiest way to handle the situation.
If we were to condition it that it be moved that it be put to a position greater than 50 feet, if you choose to do it, we give you permission to do that.
Okay.
If you choose to tear it down, you're still in compliance.
Okay.
How far?
Well, 50 feet on
50.
a no-build, right?
Yeah, just outside of the no build.
So rather than tell him it has to go, if he chooses to move it, he can.
Okay. Thank you.
Motion?
That's an IDA, right? I move that we issue a negative determination, a negative number 3, with a condition for a post-construction inspection.
And the ability to move the shed more than 50.
Revised to allow you to move the shed out of the 50.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you. Next one is 7 South Cross Road.
So South Cross is, we had a very similar filing.
Hello.
At 21 South Cross, I believe, where there were stumps buried and large sinkholes on the property. Again, trying to get to the plan before I recast it.
And Heidi says it's not as bad as the one that we approved previously.
Right, so this is very similar to the last one. This is actually farther away than the last sinkholes that were shown. That work has been done and has gone well, and this is a very similar filing.
Any questions, Jeff?
Is all work outside the 25-foot not disturbed?
It's actually all outside the 50, I believe, on this one. And there's a marker post actually at the 25, that because of the sinkhole fell down, that'll be replaced as part of this. Just to, you want to present for the commission who you are and...
Sure. Paul Neely, 7 South Cross Road, lived there since 2002. And we used to have a nice level backyard. Actually, a couple of years after we moved in, we were able to put up a volleyball net, and the kids play volleyball back there. Now we have craters, and when we have people over, we put up caution tape so that nobody breaks a leg. The ones in the backyard, to the left, are the ones that, like, where we used to play volleyball. The one on the right is the one that concerned me for years, because it's right along the road. So I've always been afraid that, somebody, especially at night, walking dogs or whatever, it's a big hole. And, I just want to fill those in.
This is Riverfront too. You presented in front of us a couple of years ago for the new deck and the addition
Correct.
on the house. And they have a restoration area. Everything looks good out there.
Yeah, I guess I mean, I don't necessarily have a problem with it, but on the recommendations, it said that the area is near the 25-foot, and one of the 25-foot marker posts fell due to the sinkhole. So it sounds like it is sounds like it is
okay.
inside
Maybe
the 50.
I thought Heidi said this one was farther than the last one. Yeah, so maybe it was just the presentation this morning. I haven't been on the site. I've been on the site for the previous edition, and this is within the mowed lawn area of the yard. So there's riverfront and buffer zone, but this is outside of the area we had to mitigate last time. The area's been marked and is fine, so I guess we just assumed that it was farther, because I thought,
That's what she said.
yeah, so, sorry.
Yeah, there are several posts, and I don't know what the distance is from the post to the wetland, is it, or the brook that's back there? But
Here's the sinkholes. Heidi's taken some
one
pictures.
post did
of-
actually fall into the sinkhole.
It is pretty dramatic if you take a look at it.
Just past.
Did we ever determine what's causing the sinkholes, not that it matters?
Stumps, we think, yeah.
Right, stumps.
Back then,
The point I was going to raise is, we better mentally prepare ourselves that that situation is going to likely persist right through the entire development. People may be even closer, and at some point, we got to understand it's not the people who live there now who caused it, it's the builder who did it, likely, almost certainly. North and South Cross are not that old. That activity of burying stumps was illegal back then.
80s, yeah.
Yeah,
80s they were built.
you just didn't do it.
it was on, it was off, it was.
Yeah.
It's intimate.
So,
On top.
All right, well,
so the fact that we've got that situation, we just be preparing ourselves that we're likely to see others come in.
it's all right, we can handle it.
Right.
No more questions.
Yep.
No questions.
Al?
No, I'll say.
I'm all set.
Doug? Motion?
I'll follow the recommendation. I'll recommend a negative number 3 with erosion controls to be determined by the administrator.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
I'm sorry, and also on one post with marker that fell to be replaced.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That changed. All set.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Next one, I'm gonna have to abstain, and my vice chair is gonna take over 505 Sutton.
Okay, so for the record, regarding 505 Sutton Street, is that the one we're talking about?
Yes.
505 Sutton Street. The chairman is recusing himself. And Jen, can you just update us before we?
Yep, 1 second, I'm just gonna pull up the plan, since this appears to be largely what will move
Looks pretty
forward
nasty,
with the
huh?
commission.
That's in tough shape.
I wanna get the buffer zone on here.
That last name, wow. Look at the last name of that in the photo. Vinden Spruce.
All right,
Hooten.
so at the last meeting, we had
Still-
multiple abutters present who had various concern about what was going on the property off-site. No one had allowed us on-site to do review of the off-site wetlands. So we left the meeting expecting to be contacted by several of the abutters. The lot where the wetland is shown in the buffer zone, hence on this lot, Mr. Duffy did contact me, did ask to see a copy of the plan and the RDA, which I did send him. He then contacted me again and said they were all set and they didn't want us on the property.
Okay.
The neighbor, Mr. Festa, did contact us. He had been away for the prior meeting and said we were welcome on his property. So I scheduled a meeting, and we did go out and we walked the entire perimeter of the 505 property. You know, it's all staked as to the property line, so it was easy to stay on property where we needed to, and reviewed what we could see. So at this point, I had a much better idea, thanks to the consultant, to where the wetland was, and we were able to look at the vegetation. It was visible from the property line. At one end of the depression, there's a large, what we believe to be a speckled alder. All the catkins are now with leaf off. You know, you're able to see that. At the other end, it's poison ivy and buckthorn, so put both facultative species in.
Pretty clear.
Right, and there is a depression, and despite the rain, there was still no standing water, but it's visible what we're looking at. And so then we went on to Mr. Festa's property, and there is clearly no wetland on Mr. Festa's property. We did do some soil sampling, but absolutely nothing. We proceeded, you know, as I said, around all the perimeter with nothing else visible from there. So with that, I'm confident we've done due diligence to confirm wetland in the area. Again, the wetland does require all 3 parameters, but barring that we can't do soil testing there, we're limited to what we see on the plan at this point. And with that, I'll turn it over.
Yeah, Rich Kirby from LEC Environmental. Essentially, I echo what Ms. Hughes said. We did have an opportunity to see the off-site wetland or apparent wetland from the property. Now that some of the leaves have come off the trees and shrubs, we could see a little bit further, and you know, as Ms. Hughes indicated, we saw the speckled alder. So we really have no idea if it's greater than or less than 1,000 square feet, but I think for the purposes of this RDA, we have to presume that it is and go from there. So I guess at this point, absent any further questions, we'd be seeking a determination of applicability, affirming the extent of buffer zone on the plan.
So what I just wanted, so Jen, you're our expert. So I just want you to confirm the applicant's statement. You're in agreement with the delineation as it stands on its face.
Right.
As-
I would guess, given what we have seen, that it's plus or minus 1,000 square feet. You know, it's right in that ballpark, without being able to measure on site. And the buffer zone, he explained to me, it does curve away from the site, so it's hard to say exactly what buffer it throws. But given what he's shown, I think it's a good estimate of what's out there.
But to be more clear on where we were last week, there was some suggestion that other properties had wetland areas and that there might be a connection of all those in sequence, therefore it might kick it above 5,000. Absolutely no way.
Absolutely not, from what we've seen.
Okay.
Not on the-
That's what we hope to
Yeah.
get the answer to.
Okay, so let's just, there were a substantial number of abutters at the last meeting that wanted to be heard. Any of the abutters here tonight that want to be heard, ask a question, make a statement, anybody at all with regard to this project? And for the record, none answer. So then I will start with the table. Mr. Maben?
I have no questions. I agree. It looks like we've done our due diligence on this one, and have no more to say.
All set.
All set.
You're out,
I'm all set.
and you're out. Okay, so if there's nothing further, no further information, it's time to call it. So,
We're looking for a positive number 5 and 6, which is confirming the delineation of only buffer zone on the property to isolated vegetated wetland, and that is only reviewable under the local bylaw.
So moved.
Second.
Deb and Joe.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? There's none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And again, none answer. It's unanimous.
Thank you very much.
I will give the gavel back to Mr. Napoli.
Next one is 895 4th Street.
So this was a violation reported to us. I'm just looking for the plan here in my electronic files. Triple filing fees have been paid. This is an as-built situation. And you did have a filing out here. You can see the gray areas on the plan were former areas converted to lawn. And at the very bottom of the plan, given what I'm able to present, and that little bar does not present at the bottom of my, let's see if I can get rid of that. I guess I can't. But the gray, oh, that's a little better. The stone wall at the bottom was required by you at a previous date, and the hatched area is buffer zone mitigation, which is in place, and if, we do have aerial photos, which I can show you. That one. So that's the aerial of the site. You can see where your buffer zone mitigation is. There's 2 of them, as well as the work that's currently out there. So there's been no encroachment into the no disturb zone. And I'll let the applicants present, but there are some new structures that are on the property, and that's what they're seeking approval for. So,
Yes, so we put up a fence. We have 2 retired horses that we put back there and some chickens. So the structure is for the chickens. The structure that we're looking to get approval for is a run-in shed for the horses, but I don't really feel like we're going to do that. It was just sort of like, well, we'll put it in there just in case down the road we decide to. At this moment, we're not planning on doing that.
but you have a fence. The work that has been done is a fence, which does require a waiver because the no disturb zone was originally a 25-foot, and as we confirmed on a filing on Wildwood recently, that is a potential vernal pool, so the actual no disturb zone is 50 feet. So they're seeking a waiver of the no disturb zone, which I think in this case is grantable, given that you did permit that the no disturb zone was a stone wall in a certain location. The coops are on the back of the garage structure, and they're largely impervious. They're not anything that I think impedes water from eventually finding its way into the ground.
You say impervious, you don't need to say.
Yeah, they're largely
Pervious.
pervious, right. I think the shed structure is largely impervious, but again, quite a distance from the well.
Jen, could you point out where the, let's see, where's our 25-foot no disturb zone? And where's the 50-foot?
The boulder wall?
The boulder wall, okay,
So the
But
shed is
isn't that
now the
replication?
70, right, so,
okay.
I'm sorry, I asked,
And I guess,
I send you guys these things electronically, so I know it isn't always easy to get to them, but that's the plan you're looking at. So the 50-foot isn't shown because now what matters is the 75 no build. So the proposed run out would be in the 75. Again, this is all within existing yard and developed land. The two chicken coops are more than 75 feet.
It's just the fence.
Well, the fence, and if they did build the proposed run out, it would be in the 75-foot no build to a vernal pool. But like in many situations, these things were all built, approved, multiple projects. This was a project that was approved after the subdivision was approved. So even that, the vernal pool wasn't identified at that point. Somewhere along the way, Natural Heritage identified this one as a prospect. It isn't certified.
so has the end of the fence come up to the
It's,
end of that 94-foot contour line?
right, so the fence is shown outside of the no-build zone.
Right
This is the
here.
fence, right
Yeah.
here.
The fence goes all the way?
All the way around the property, because they have horses.
I see. That's what I didn't understand.
Sorry.
What's the size of the lot?
3+ acres.
3+.
Okay, so the fence is just a small distance outside the 25-foot no disturb zone at its closest.
Right. With a monumented wall, and I think some of the markers Heidi said may be
Yes.
missing, but they would put back the markers that were missing.
So what's the basis of the waiver request?
The fence would be just outside the 25, which is now a 50-foot no disturb zone due to the ephemeral pool, or potential.
Potentially.
And you're, okay, to the boulder then.
But you have seen this in 2000, I forget what the date of the plan is, but you might have it in front of you, maybe 2005, 2006. Before I was here, this was in front of you. And you did approve this as is shown and as is maintained out there. They have not violated the no disturb zone in any way. And Heidi confirmed the wetland line. She didn't think it needed to be redelineated because when she went out there, everything looked pretty much the same as it had been for a number of years.
So in the previous filing, we monumented the 25-foot no disturb by that stone wall. And that extends up the side of the lot. And the after-the-fact filing addresses activity, including a fence inside, up gradient of that
Correct.
25-foot line,
Yes.
in all cases. Okay.
I'm just looking at the plan, I don't remember. I know you say I should, but I don't. But I understand, so the row of boulders, you feel, is a better barrier than anything we could create?
Well, they're putting the fence up gradient
Up on
of
the-
the
up-
boulder, so
upside,
if anything,
uphill,
it's a double barrier now.
So there'd be no incursions?
Correct.
Okay, yeah.
And there have been no incursions.
Good, thank you.
So are we concerning ourselves at all with the keeping of horses within a setback to an ephemeral pool? a vernal pool?
So I looked, so we contacted Natural Heritage because this is also in endangered species habitat, and they were fine with the fact that it's a clear exemption, structures associated with the use of a single-family house. And Heidi pointed out the fact that it was indeed farm animals, and they were no further concerned.
That was my question. And they're not concerned with it?
No.
We called twice.
But they're gonna keep them out anyway, my understanding, that's why you have the fence, right? The
Yes,
purpose of the fence is to keep them out of there.
right, exactly.
Okay, all right. yeah.
Okay, awesome.
What's
Yeah.
the size of the fence? And height?
I would, it's, height-wise, it's probably, I mean, it's
Post and rail.
tall
5 feet.
enough that they could
Oh.
not get out.
I see it, yeah. It's like a horse fence.
Yes.
Electricity keeps them out too.
I know.
Yeah, works well.
I know. They don't always respect that, though, and
They
my
don't
fear
respect
was-
post and rail, but they do respect electricity. If you-
Right, the problem we had is in the snow, sometimes the fence goes down and then they're
Gotcha.
gone, you know?
Good.
And that was what we wanted to avoid, having them.
Understood.
Okay, so no more questions on motion?
So what are we looking for here, Jen?
-3.
Jen,
First, we have to grant the waiver.
and the waiver is a waiver from the setback.
Setbacks.
Setback waiver. Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. I'll move that.
Second. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion unanimous.
And then Heidi says,
Okay,
-3 with pre and post for the shed shelter and replacing wetland markers on 4x4 posts where they're similarly on small grade stakes. So it'll be an improvement.
Before we go on to motion there, are there any other applications pending on this at all? Is this your only application pending before any board or town, anything like that? So, we're just concerned, in this one, we're just concerned with wetland issues.
Right, so there have been some inquiries into the farm aspects of it, but those don't concern the
No,
commission.
Not with us, okay.
So I think, I
So-
don't know if you've received any inquiries from the building inspector, and I know the health, everybody's
So
trying
we
to
just have
say.
the reason why I say, I just want to make it clear that any action we take here
Is not.
has no
they're-
bearing on
they don't
other
need
decisions
any
made by other departments.
To
It's-
my knowledge, they're not waiting on any
You
other
understand what I'm
permits
saying? In
for
other
any
words, if
other
we grant an
department.
approval and a waiver, we're not in any way granting any type of approval that would be before the Board of Health or the Building Department or anything else.
Oh, we understand that.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. All right, so with that understood, I'll move the -3 determination with pre and post construction for the new shed and existing wetland markers to be placed where missing and upgraded to 4x4 posts.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous. Well said, thank you.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
guys.
I got some-
Topos?
Yeah, that's right, we'll make it back eventually.
All right, next one is Oak Ridge Village.
So this is the meadows. So here's the issue with this. We're trying to close out the meadows, and we have been for some time. Phases 1 and 2, we largely closed out some time ago before we would let things happen with Phase 3. And we did grant a partial bond release on that. There is a PCOC on the agenda tonight to release sections 1 and 2, which I would fully support. But Mrs. Massetti, has been dealing with trying to get the as-built on that, which we all know is an issue, has been unable to do that, and so she isn't able to go for the PCOC tonight, and she also wants to seek a bond release. So needless to say, the PCOC issue is somewhat still in flux. With that, they need to replace decks at phases 1 and 2, and they want to replace a good number of them with patios rather than decks, which I think we did a modification for in phase 3. Again, I don't have any issue with that, but it's just a matter of whether you want to start on another filing, knowing that phases 1 and 2 are in compliance, but phase 3 is not. We don't have a PCOC on 1 and 2. Phase 3 is still open and needs an as-built. It's a whole project in flux, but people need work done, and this RDA is in front of you for that work. But how you want to deal with that is,
You still have the bond.
we do still have, I think it's over $50,000 in bond.
And I saw pictures of the decks, and they're not invasive at all, they're very, very small.
It's a single order of conditions for the entire project.
So Heidi went out and took some pictures of what the decks look like and what the current patios look like, so we have that.
What year did we issue this?
I was not here when you issued Oak Ridge, but I was here when we went through the whole Phase 3 issue. And
I mean, I guess what I'm
that
asking.
was 2009.
How old are these decks that have to be replaced already?
See, the problem is, so we have 21 decks that that we're redoing, and 10 of them landed within the wetland areas. So the decks that we're replacing, they're ground level decks, so the PTs were basically sitting on the ground since they've been built. So they're just starting to rot
They're
out.
the dark ones.
So from the ground level decks, we're taking out the PT and we're putting in pavers, patios, because there wasn't enough room from the bottom of the slider to the ground to have enough, air or whatever underneath for those decks to breathe, and they've just been rotting since they've been built.
This is pressure-treated lumber that's
Pressure
rotting?
treated lumber, yep. And the material they used around the decks, it was pressure treated, but the trim they used was like a cardboard kind of pressed trim. So all that stuff has just been swelling and it's gone, and the rails are falling apart. So there's 5 raised decks that we're going to be replacing too, because the rails are falling apart. We're not changing any of the footprints, nothing. We're just going to be upgrading them from PT to composite with composite railings.
What's your name, just for the
I'm
record?
Kevin Winter. I'm a project manager for SPS. So the decks are 8 by 10, the existing decks, and we're not changing the footprint, the size, anything like that.
Second question.
Setbacks outside the 50, where are
Well,
they?
this was a 40B,
This is a
so
40B.
they are in the 50, but they are outside the 25. And so we have already done all the compliance issues with everything on this portion of the site. I did it, I think, late in the spring this year. We did walkthroughs of everything. There was still snow on the ground, but there wasn't much because it was this spring and not last spring. But I think all erosion control had been removed, all buffer zones outside of some invasive incursion were respected. Markers were in place, everything.
Are any of the proposed replacements larger than what was originally approved?
No,
That's-
it's the same.
No?
I mean, the original construction, we're replacing it exactly the same as the way it is right now, same footprint.
I'd consider suggesting pervious pavers for the patios. I don't know if your project can,
We did say it was gonna put pavers.
They're not
Is that
pervious, they're
pervious?
set in,
Yeah.
they're set in stone
Stone
dust.
dust.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, pervious pavers would be a better solution for the replacements where you're replacing with patios. So I'd suggest that you consider that. No more questions?
Yep, no questions, Al.
I agree with Jack. This is an opportunity to make it better.
Okay.
That would mean just setting them in stone and sand rather than stone dust.
Yeah, so what we're doing the stone dust bin, we have 1.25 inches of the sand bedding. that we're
Right, but
putting
if you,
stones in.
if you grout them with stone dust, they won't be pervious.
Right. So, I mean, would you rather have us grout them with just a sanding bed rather than the stone dust?
Well, or a finer gravel.
Finer gravel, okay.
Don't you use that polymeric
We-
sand?
Yes,
For the
yes.
top of it?
For the top, yeah,
I think you can still do that.
yeah.
Yeah.
We sweep that in and then compact it.
Right. I think it's best if it's just gravel in between, honestly. I mean, if you want them to be pervious, the sand will fill the fines, but
No, I think we want them to be pervious. I really do. At least I do.
Well, what we're trying to get is to mimic infiltration that was part of the original project.
right,
I
which
mean,
the
putting
decks
it-
would have.
That close to the building and infiltrating in may not be a practical answer, though typically if you're putting pavers in, you're gonna pitch them away from your door, pitch them away from the building. Maybe the leading edge is a drip edge, an infiltrating trench that just allows it to soak in once it hits the edge of let it run off the patio and get it into the infiltrator.
Oh, so the outer course?
And let the paver be installed and do its job as it normally would.
So one of the things you've done is put a course of gravel around the pavers?
That's what I'm saying, around the perimeter, drip edge.
The perimeter. Oh, okay. I thought you meant on the inside of the
No. The whole patio will, patio, I guess that's what it's going to be
drip
now.
edge to the
Let
patio.
it shed away from the building, and then where it hits the grass, put a deliberate infiltrator
6 inches of
Just let the
gravel.
stuff soak in right there, rather than have it, because I think you can end up with frost action and everything else underneath the patio that you don't want to fool around with.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So we could condition that, and that would
Absolutely.
work for your,
So that means impervious patios with pervious drip edge around the perimeter.
Right.
Makes sense.
Also,
I'm also,
also on, in Jen's recommendation, she stated that.
Heidi's, I didn't write this.
Heidi, is Mrs. Massetti was going to have her attorney write a letter for bond reduction. I think Mrs. Massetti should be writing should be writing a letter to the engineer, so we can get the as-bills and stuff,
Okay.
because that's what holds up this project.
Yeah, I don't know Mrs. Massetti. I'm dealing with
He's new
the
and
the
beyond
condo
the-
board, and the board president is who hired us to do the job, and I wasn't too familiar with the original construction with the place. We're just there doing, fixing some stuff and the decks and
that
stuff.
was your point when you first, so what is this? The reason it's coming as an RDA is because it's a separate body, separate applicant, separate project on the same property.
Right.
And rather than fool around with the confusion of all the prior amendments, the various phases, the various partial certificates of compliance and whatnot, rather than fool around with any of that, let this stand on its own.
Right.
And there is no request in front of us for a bond reduction.
No,
There is
but it's-
not.
But it's.
There has been, we have the PCOC on the agenda tonight for Phase 1 and Phase 2.
Well, they can ask away.
Well, I would,
Nothing for us right
I'm not
now.
going to say I wouldn't advise against granting that. The bond reduction's a whole different story, but I do
I'm
think,
not mixing the two.
okay.
I'm not mixing
Good.
them at all.
I guess
This stands on its face.
Right, but what I would say is normally we don't allow a filing to go forward if there's an outstanding order of conditions. The difference, and let's be distinct about it on this one, is they did massive amounts of work in order to permit Phase 3 to prove that Phase 2 was in compliance. They redid stormwater structures, they put up boundary markers, there were replication, everything on this portion of the site is in compliance. And I think that's and they had to prove that before we would re-permit Phase 3 of the project. So I think it's very different than just saying, we'll move forward without a certificate of compliance. We made them do that work to prove it to us some time ago.
Well, like I said, we corral the horse, we want to keep it that way.
Right. So I don't think we're violating our standard of needing to know that what's out there now is in compliance to move forward with a new project.
Okay, done? Okay, so we need a motion.
So this would be a negative number 3 with silt sock erosion control and pre and post construction inspections, in addition of the drip edges to the patios.
Do you have any problem if the motion just, instead of calling it silt sock erosion control, just call for erosion controls instead of mandating what type to use?
As approved by the,
Just to be.
we generally say on this
because-
kind of project where there's minimal excavation, it's 12-inch silt sock biodegradable, just because they can put it out there.
You can do-
Does the land slope, or is it flat?
In some areas it
Some
does
areas it
slope.
drops off in the back.
Right.
So,
So we can say as approved by the,
Areas
co-
where it
as,
slopes, then you
okay.
need this erosion, but in flat areas, you don't need it.
so I
So-
would rather just word it.
As
if-
approved.
If I had my way, I would word it with erosion controls to be placed at the discretion of the administrator or
Yeah, that's fine.
town inspector, whoever you want. But I don't want to call it silt socks, I don't want to call it hay
No,
bales.
just
It's
use erosion.
erosion
So
controls.
as
is gonna be
proposed
kind of what
with
it is.
drip edge and
It could be a
with-
silt fence, it could be a silt sock, could be anything, you know?
as approved by the Conservation Department.
Right,
That's what I'm looking for.
Gotcha.
so moved. All those in favor say aye.
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 I'm
Opposed?
going with Deb Al, unanimous on that one.
That was unanimous, yes, it was. That was unanimous.
All set.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
Thanks for
you.
your time.
Okay, next one is, no file number yet for 150 Flagship Drive. Mike, you're slipping.
Okay.
You already have this number.
Is Royal Crest,
Your influence just
Royal
isn't
Crest
what it
and I
used to
would
be.
both-
continues?
Both continue.
Oh.
We need you to
Both
announce that, all right?
Yeah, I
You
will.
want- You want to do that before or after we go to this?
All right, we can do that. 242, no file number 50, Royal Crest, request to continue till
Do you have it?
Next meeting, 3 weeks, 11/16.
11/16.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. And 242-1668, request to continue to November
16th.
15th.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. Okay. Now we
So-
want channel.
On
150
this-
flag.
At the last meeting, you asked that we get snow storage. On the plan, which did occur. So the plan in front of you has snow storage areas. Can I get that photo shown? We also received an operation and maintenance plan, to which I did have a brief discussion with Lisa because I read through it and saw some things that she would standard change, and I recommended those. But outside of that, I think everything you've asked for is on the plan. I do think, since they've shown the snow storage areas, I agree with those, but I do think we're going to need still some no snow stockpiling signs to make sure that plowing doesn't occur in areas where we don't want it to occur. And with that, I'll turn it over to the applicants.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Mike Howard from Epsilon Associates. To my left, again, is Nicole Duquette from MHF Design Consultants. Jen summarized it well. There were a couple housekeeping items. One was updating the drawings to depict the snow storage areas, which are shown in 2 locations. Nicole also added, based on what we think you directed us to do, Joe, we showed 2 locations where no snow stockpiling signs would be installed. Those are also shown on the plan. Jen emailed me late in the day with a couple other additional minor edits she wants to the maintenance plan per her discussion with Lisa. I think the major change that Nicole and I hemmed and hawed about was we have made a decision not to bring the snow to Haverhill, so it will be in North Andover, and that's now reflected correctly in the O&M plan. I think the only other thing that's frustrating to me, but perhaps more frustrating for my client, is, of course, we do not have the DEP file number yet. The check is shown as being cleared on our end, but not on DEP's end. So I have called them regularly. I've used all my tools in the toolbox, but I have not had any success getting a number for tonight's hearing.
Call Charlie.
And now we've
Call
lost
Charlie.
the screen
Charlie's
entirely.
next on the
Call
list.
Charlie.
Jack, any questions?
Yeah, what was up there wasn't that great anyway.
Okay, also, I think Heidi said that there was no provision for parking, lot sweeping. Is that?
So I reviewed this. So when I just reviewed the O&M plan and went over a few, I just gave Lisa a call just because she generally does these things for us, and we didn't deem that was. So the parking lot sweeping was something I noticed that isn't in there. I'm sure they do it, because I can't imagine that they salt and sand their parking lot and don't sweep it, so I think that should be in there. Generally speaking, with deep sump catch basins, the provision is always that you clean when it's halfway to the top, but anybody who's cleaning a catch basin has no idea what halfway is, so Lisa generally recommends that it's 4-foot sumps typically, so that when it reaches 2 feet from the lowest invert pipe, that you clean them. But she also says that annual cleaning, because if it gets to 2 feet, the general finding is that the sediments then start to wash out continuously. So even if it's at 2 feet, and you'll never know, because it'll never get beyond 2 feet.
And there's more to it than that. So the stump is for storage of,
I'm not an engineer, and you are.
the stump is for the storage of the sediments as they fall in, and as the water evaporates out as source. The reality is you need a certain volume of water in order to slow the turbidity down and let it settle out. So the shallower it gets, the less likely it is to settle out and it stays in suspension, and even turbid water moves down through the pipe. So
That's what I said.
well, at least once a year.
So will all that be included in the O&M?
Yes, we can make
Yeah,
those
we
changes.
take no issue with that. That's fine.
Okay, thanks.
Al?
All set.
Joe,
I'm done teaching for tonight.
would you like to add on to that? I'm seeing you're an engineer. All right. With that being said, motion. Oh, we don't have a final?
We can't, we
Can't be
can't.
done.
We can't.
So I did start
If you
to,
wanted to consider it, you could.
Yeah,
I'm
but
just
I-
throwing it on the table, maybe.
no, because we have 21 days.
We can't
is-
continue
is
anyway,
too-
right?
We have-
Right,
We
so,
can't close anything.
like,
We
if
have 3
if we
weeks.
could close an issue, but I can't even put it into DEP because I
Because your
don't.
next hearing's on the 16th.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so 3 weeks I can't, without a file
What if we
number.
grant a waiver to the 21 days, put something in writing that we would, accede to that?
We've done that, Don has a form.
The only reason I'm asking is, we're going to lose the paving season. I mean, we're going to miss it. I have the proof of mailing the DEP sign for the check. I have the green card. I just can't get revenue to clear it.
Well, what do you want us to waive? What are you asking us to waive?
DEP to give you a straight answer.
So,
I'm
so we're
working
going to
hard.
waive whatever it is that DEP finally issues the
That's
file
as high as I
number.
can
that-
get.
Well, if we close, we can't receive the new materials, but,
You can it's mine. You can just condition it anyway. It's what we're.
right, we could condition that, yeah.
Well, we're satisfied with it.
Well, what about the, what
Told
about,
it, hang on to everything.
what about the appeal period? then?
The appeal period starts from when we issue the order. So if you close the public hearing in 3 weeks, I mean, actually, technically, the
I mean,
next
it's-
hearing is exactly 3 weeks. It would have
But
to
it's-
issue on that
We
day.
can close an issue at the same night, wouldn't that be the net?
Right, but they're hoping that they get that DEP file number in the next 3 days, and I can close and issue this hearing. The problem is they won't get to review the order of conditions, but, so bond amounts and those sorts of things, we'd have to decide tonight after this hearing closes, which I'm fine with. The project's not anything complicated. It's more if you're comfortable with it.
It's not, I don't have I'm comfortable. I just want to make sure that we don't make a administrative
If we close an issue,
error.
I could also circulate the order of conditions. You couldn't comment in unison, but like, we could, I guess in general, we could discuss the bond amount tonight. That would be the major thing for me that we would need to have in there. You know, we'd condition the O&M. It would be attached to and have to be updated prior to issuance of the certificate of compliance because we record those now. It's not being discussed tonight, but one of the conditions was that if they decided they needed full replacement of the culvert pipe, they would have to come back to us.
Yep, we made that clear in our filing.
Yep.
We're not, right.
The snow stockpile areas are now on the plan and approved. So there really isn't anything outstanding, but I didn't draft an order of conditions.
No waivers requested, Al.
My problem with that is consistency.
Yeah, I'm worried about setting precedent.
That's what I'm saying.
We're getting our ducks in a row and trusting the applicant and carrying it out. I'm not at all concerned. I'm just afraid of someone else rubbing our nose in it.
Right now, we're gonna open up a can of worms.
Well, I think it
Well,
puts
this is a
your,
situation where the
I think
state
it puts the
tried to
applicant more at
compete.
risk than us. We're not gonna
Right.
issue an order until
So why should they?
the 16th anyway.
For that.
You know, they're
So
proceeding
DEP,
at
I
their
mean,
own
years ago,
risk.
DEP had just a backlog of review. That was a huge problem, long since solved. They've been turning them around much faster. So this is strictly that they've completed the review and.
It says fees still waiting to clear revenue, which isn't really entirely understandable since the
Does that
fee
mean they
has
haven't even
cleared
reviewed
revenue.
it from their own account yet?
No, they haven't reviewed it.
They won't review it until,
Review is usually less of an issue, especially on a project like this. I doubt DEP is going to have comments on something like this. It's more about the DEP website says their fee hasn't cleared, but he has the return check and the green card.
I had 2 conversations with DEP, and the gentleman I spoke with twice is he's just waiting for the check to, he's happy to issue the file number. He was just waiting for the check to clear Department of Revenue. For whatever reason, it's delayed. And Joe, I'd like to tell you that DEP isn't backed up, but he's telling me they're at least 2 weeks behind. I know some other folks in the room have gotten their file numbers, and I'm envious of their situations, but I'm hearing folks chatter about that. I have had no luck in this case. And it's, unfortunately, I know it's not the commission's problem. I get that and I acknowledge that, but it's put my client in a real bind because we were losing the season. If we don't get the order to the end of November, then.
middle of November, if you're not on a paving schedule by now, you're not going to get it done.
And maybe that's the case. I don't know. I'm just trying to do what I can to try and.
How would closing it tonight increase your work time? How
Well,
would that
because
happen?
if we issue it on the 16th, he has a 10-day appeal period beyond that.
So you're suggesting we
It'll be
issue
the
it tonight?
26th. I'm not saying anything. I'm just
I'm
saying I
how-
understand his situation.
How would we issue it tonight? I'm empathetic.
We'd issue it tonight without a number, so when the number came in, you just simply put
No,
that
we'd
at the
be
top of the
closing
phone.
the order tonight. We'd be closing the public hearing. That's all we'd be doing. I mean, we could hold a
So.
special hearing with the
But how
quorum
does
of the
that- to Al's
commission
point,
to
how does that
approve yours.
change, how does that change
How
the
does-
tolling
just
time?
asking,
Well,
how does that make
because
this happen faster?
It isn't the way you operate, but it is the way a lot of commissions operate. They close and issue a positive order of conditions. We've had this discussion before. Ipswich does this. They just close and issue a positive order of conditions. We don't necessarily read through it before we issue it. The agent drafts it with the recommendations of the commission, and it goes out. We sign a signature page that night. It doesn't issue until, I mean, it's strange to close without a DEP file number.
It
though.
is. I
That's
acknowledge
kind of the weird precedent on this one.
Essentially, I'm asking respectfully, asking the commission to consider, even if we had the file number tonight, it'd be essentially me asking the commission to consider closing and issuing the decision tonight. That's essentially what I'm asking. Knowing Jen can't actually issue the decision until the file number comes in, it would sit on her desk. And
Can I make a suggestion? Can we table this
Till later in the
till
meeting?
later in the meeting?
Yeah.
And then we can have the discussion? And we won't make everybody else sit here all night and listen to it?
It's
Any
fine.
objection if we table you?
No, sir.
All right, thank you. I move that we table.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Thank you. Thank you for assenting to being tabled.
Thank you, Mr. Nancy.
Next one is 242-1689 Salem Street.
See what happens when I change files. No, nothing happens.
Next meeting?
I don't know. I just made a decision.
The next meeting is November what?
16th?
16th? Is that what I heard?
Yes.
Okay. I'll be back in time.
Colored plans for the commission. So, Maureen, which scan do I want? The PDF, 821, 820,
Sheet 1?
sheet 1? Okay.
You want one?
Sure. Okay. All right, here we go. Here we go, which I'm sure it won't be great, but, or maybe it won't be anything at all. This is so weird. What's going on?
Here comes the argument between who paid, plows the driveway up there.
Do you want me to start then?
No, I've got it, hold on, it's just a different plan I have to put up here, because that one won't pass.
Okay.
It's not subdivision, right? It's Form A.
So that's part of the discussion, which we'll get to in a minute. So the filing before you is, all right, this is crazy, this should be casting. I think it's because it's such a big file that you have in front of you. It's taking some time to download. The short of it is I reviewed the wetland delineation with Norse Environmental this week. Across the street is bordering vegetated wetland and riverfront associated with Boston Brook. Some of the questions, I have no issues with the BVW delineation whatsoever. Norse out in the field had delineated 2 mean high water lines. There is a second stream channel which is slightly closer than the one you see on this plan. That is more of a backwater area and does have mean high water characteristics and a little bit of flow, but is only connected by the main channel. I did seek some advice on how to delineate that. Failed to.
Is that the A series, Jim?
No, it's not shown on your plan, but it was delineated out in the field, so it made it somewhat confusing. So I have sought some advice on that, but I don't have problems with what you see on your plan. I just think there could be a little bit more riverfront area that you see, depending on the advice I received from DEP. The bigger question became, if you look to the top of your plan, there is an off-site wetland associated with Campbell Woods. That delineation occurred sometime in the 90s, I believe, 80s or 90s. It's an 800 file number, so it's quite a long time ago. So that is not by any means accurate. Ooh, brain freeze. Great.
Where are you referring to, Jen?
At the back of the property, up by where you see the words Lot 1 on the plan, to the back, there's bordering vegetated wetlands. When we walked up there, right in I believe it's in the area where you see the words Lot 1, we also discovered a large depression, which clearly holds water, has hydrophilic vegetation and signs of hydrology. The only thing we weren't able to obtain was soils. It's very rocky in there, so they were going to go back and look at that area. So I think there's some things on the wetland delineation that still need confirming. The project in front of you, given the delineation, is only for the driveways that you see at the front of the lot. They have filed with the planning board for a frontage exception and the common driveway permit. However, the subdivision you see of the lots is unapproved, and in either scenario, whether it's subdivided, A&R, whatever it turns out to be, this amount of disturbance would require a land disturbance permit, which has not been filed for under the stormwater bylaw. So I think there's an outstanding permit that needs to be applied for, but can't be applied for based on the other permits needed. So with that, I'll turn it over to the consultant.
Good evening. My name is Maureen Harold, North Environmental Services, here on behalf of the applicant. Jen did a really well introduction of the project. For the wetlands located off-site behind lots 1 and 2, those wetlands were taken from a previously approved plan from quite some time ago. We did not delineate those wetlands because they are off-site and they're on private property. So we could either get permission to try and delineate those wetlands if that's what the commission would like, or if we can't receive permission, Jen and I had discussed about just kind of field checking it, going out in the field and checking it. The good thing about these wetlands is it's a pretty well-defined slope and it's a depression, so I don't think there'll be too much discussion as to where the actual wetland line is. And this also is in priority habitat, and we received a letter from Natural Heritage stating that the project will not adversely affect the habitat area. So that's October 25th, we received that. We received a DEP file number, that's under review. We also filed a waiver with the commission for the 50-foot. It's a peach line on your plan that delineates the 50-foot. So part of the 2 driveways and the stone construction entrance, if the project is approved, that would be located within the 50-foot. But essentially, all of the resource areas are down gradient and across the street from the site. And just one other thing to note, on the back of Lot 2, and this is in your plan set, there is an isolated wetland here that's an ephemeral pool. This project abuts the, the Salem Woods project here that the commission previously approved maybe 6 years ago now. But we are staying 300 feet away from that ephemeral pool on that property.
George Hazeltine's three-lot subdivision.
Salem Woods, that was,
Salem Woods.
No, not,
Merrimack?
no, no,
Merrimack Engineering's?
no, George Hazeltine, I think you
Yeah.
remember him? He redid a house at the front and put two lots out at the
Yes,
back.
Yes.
Again, very steep driveway. I think the planning board reviewed that under a common driveway permit as well. Lisa reviewed it, there's a big swale,
Right.
everything has functioned well.
So this piece is a 7.5 acre piece directly to the right of it, if you're looking at the Salem Woods. So we are 300 feet away from there. And, you know, I understand that this is an introductory meeting tonight. I just wanted to open the project, get your thoughts and opinions on it. I will be asking for a continuance after I get those.
Jack?
Maureen, what's the stone swale in between the two driveways? Is structure?
So this is an infiltration trench that we're proposing with check dams. So essentially what the purpose it's serving is just to collect the runoff from the driveways. As you can tell, we're going up a grade, so just to collect the runoff and infiltrate it.
So you're sloping the driveways toward each other and collecting it in, what, a rocky swale, is that?
Correct, yes.
Okay, with check dams in it. Okay, I see the check dams now. Okay. 200-foot riverfront. Is the 200-foot riverfront, the pink line, is that 200 feet from the RF series?
Correct.
Okay. And that may change depending on
Right.
the
so
backwater question.
I think there was maybe concern around RF6 or RF5, around that area. There was some backwater. I don't believe it's part of the riverfront. I'm going to check the regulations in terms of that as well.
The regulations are very unclear about that, so, you know, I guess the hard part about it is, for a certain amount of time, there is bank and there is flow, but that it doesn't connect, it's not like a braided stream where it then goes around an island and connects back to the main channel. And so, I should know better, but it's something I deal with so infrequently that I
It's been a
wasn't.
long time to back to the definition. The riverfront is from
Mean
many
high
different-
water.
Mean high water, but mean high water, but isn't it also into the floodplain too? It used to be, right?
If mean high water included the floodplain, but it's usually the, you know, the break in slope or the change in vegetation or the deposit line. I mean, there needs to be something that's defined. In this area, you have a channel that continues on. And, you know, it just brings me back to the DPW site where we did include the backwater area. So in that instance, you know, if mean high water does fill this area, I would say, you know, kind of like the Oxbow before it goes under the bridge. You know, there's a big water area there, but you wouldn't really call that, it's not the actual stream channel. So, I mean, I think there are certain things, depending on how you interpret it. This one just seemed a little less clear.
But if the resource, it just simply extends the jurisdiction a little further
A
out.
little farther. Oh,
It
still
doesn't
only
change
into
the
driveway.
proposal in any way,
I don't
right?
think it changes the proposal. And the waiver request, I guess, becomes more about the stormwater structure than the driveway, because pavement, if it's their only means of access, the bylaw is written that the 50-foot no-build zone driveway access is allowed without a waiver if there's no alternative means of access. I think because there are other things in that 50-foot besides the driveway access, you could say that the waiver is required. I think it's somewhat,
They're just BMPs, it's 3 single-family lots which are exempt from stormwater standards.
right, but not if this whole project is reviewed under the stormwater bylaw, which it would be because it constitutes more than an acre of disturbance.
Because of the disturbance area.
Right. So that's the permit that I think is missing in the filing, but you can't go and file for this if you technically don't have your subdivision, don't have your common driveways, don't have your frontage exception. So it's in a bit of a catch-22, so I'm not saying it's improperly before you, I'm just saying there is a permit that's missing, it's just not one that can be applied for at this time.
I have no more questions.
Jen, what are the characteristics of the backwater area? What does that actually mean?
It actually looks like a channel. It looks like, and even Norse originally flagged it as the channel, and if it had been anything but a drought year, it may have actually looked like a channel, because the floodplain might have connected the two. But the way it is right now, that channel goes down a certain distance and stops.
Okay, so that there's no flow then?
No.
It's contained.
Although there's flow, because the water flows into it and then has to sort of, you know,
Eddy
do a
around it.
U-ey and come right back out.
Okay,
But,
okay, thank you.
Hi. So my concern is actually with the driveway. It looks, at first glimpse to me, it looks like a gigantic point source discharge to me. And you got about a 10-foot drop approximately down to the street, and then across the street immediately into the BBW. And my concern is zero post-construction runoff. And my concern is, can you meet the standard of zero post-construction? Pre and post have to be the same. And looking at that right now, that looks like just a giant point source to me.
But this isn't subject to stormwater management standards? Unless there's a bylaw I'm not aware of that requires.
that would be in this particular case, that would be the stormwater bylaw, because you're disturbing more than an acre. And it would also, regardless of the situation, you're going to need a driveway permit, which is going to be in front of the DPW, and they won't allow them to discharge to the road under no circumstances. So it would be reviewed by the town
That was
engineer.
the tone I was trying to set at the beginning, is we need to recognize that this will ultimately require that land disturbance permit. I mean, that's the goal, they want to build it, so it ultimately will require that. We
Correct.
ought to be looking at this application in the light of that eventual step, meaning that, Al's point's right on, that you've got long, steep driveways with no sort of runoff control until the very bottom of the hill, where it all tries to do something by using a BMP of just the infiltrators. It might be adequate, it may not be, it doesn't look like it is, but we don't know, it hasn't been analyzed, you don't normally analyze it.
Well, this, yeah.
Because we're triggering land disturbance in the future, we ought to be concerning ourselves with it now.
May I ask a question? With the pre and post for the stormwater, is that for the entire driveway that's considered? Okay, so it's not just within the resource area?
Not in front of us, right? So the larger, the acre, the more than 40,000 square, 576 is outside of our jurisdiction. So that's what's going to trigger the land disturbance permit with the planning board.
Okay.
We don't regulate that. If the whole project were in front of us, or a larger portion of the project, they may put that stormwater responsibility on the commission, but I would say just because this very small portion of the site is in our jurisdiction is going to, you still have beyond us, you have an acre of disturbance beyond us.
So I understand, and we'll need to adjust the plans to accommodate for that, because obviously this is the low point.
Right.
And that's where the water.
And so that may change, that's why where the whole must obtain the permits prior to filing with us comes into play, is because this is likely going to change your requirements.
Okay.
Pardon me? Well, yeah, I'm looking at the contours, and I'm looking at and at one point I got 20 feet, and at one point I got 10 feet. I guess I'm not as proficient as reading.
38, almost 40 feet.
Yeah, is that, see,
Up to the
so
back a lot, too.
that's why we got the engineer here. So anyway, Maureen, that's my concern, and that's, at this point right now, the only concern I have.
Okay, I understand, and it'll be addressed. I wasn't aware of
Yeah.
that caveat, so.
Well,
Thank you.
I'm guessing, because Phil was somewhat involved in our land, and Christensen and Sergi is doing this plan, that he's going to say, well, projects in front of the Conservation Commission don't require a land disturbance permit because it's being controlled by the Conservation Commission. But what we've done with that in the past, Stevens Street being the most recent example, where we had 5 lots with very little Conservation Commission jurisdiction, it went on to get a land disturbance permit from the planning board, because the majority of the project is outside of our jurisdiction.
Okay.
And I do believe we have abutters here who will want to be heard on this matter. Yeah,
I'm
just
good. I'm
saying.
good,
but-
Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
I know you did some test pits for these septic systems. But I'm really surprised that they haven't done test pits on where the housing and big cuts are gonna be proposed. Because I'm familiar with this area, and it's got some serious rock. I mean, and this is gonna be a major excavation undertaking, for these 3 lots. So I'm concerned about the land disturbance, but that's a while away. And I'm also reflecting on the water going out to Salem Street. So that'll be addressed at some point after you get through planning, anyways. Joe.
Yeah, I think I kind of laid the groundwork. If this is informational, to give them guidance to go back and do some stuff, I really think that we shouldn't be considering controlling all of the runoff at the bottom where it perhaps is impossible to control, but incrementally from the top all the way down, small little treatment BMPs. I think one of the things we also want to consider ourselves looking at is that the degree of land disturbance that we said pre and post, but sometimes your worst condition is actually during construction. And I think this might be one of those situations where your worst condition is during construction. Who lived through North Andover Estates?
Yeah.
When I just remember that.
Yep, I think that's clearly recognized. When it's,
I mean,
when
nobody
it's
to
open.
the degree of that, but
Yep.
there's enough open area here where we're
And there's
understanding
enough
how
of
it's
slope.
phased.
Yep, the wrong storm
And everything's going
will overwhelm anything that's at the bottom of that hill. It'll overwhelm it, and it'll be a mess.
So that's all I have for input at this point until we see something a little more substantial. At least of which where the line is.
Yeah. Right.
Did they cut this road?
Yeah.
Like you said, we had it's all over that. It's gonna be like a
I think
funnel.
some of the topography was very different on the abutting lot too. They had a big depression at the bottom of the hill before their stone wall where everything kind of came in and settled. It was a natural settling basin during their project, whereas this just goes straight down right to the
Yeah,
road.
we've worked on projects that are similar to this in town in the past, and I'm not gonna name them, I'm just gonna tell you that once they're opened up, if the storm hits at the wrong point when it's open, it's really, literally game over.
Maureen and I discussed when we were down there that the erosion control shown on the plan is inadequate, that it would definitely, without a doubt, have to extend along the edge of the roadway.
But I don't think you could
Minimum.
control it, that's my point. I
Right.
don't think you, absent if you took 2 dump trucks and dumped 2 or 3 loads of crushed stone right at the base, you're not gonna stop it.
Well,
It's gonna come down the
I
hill
was
like
just
a freight train.
addressing with her what was in our jurisdiction, because again, the rest of that is outside
It'll
of
be
our
in jurisdiction real
jurisdiction.
quick if we let it cut it. I gotta show you that.
Doug? No, we need to continue.
Did you want to hear from abutters if anyone's
Oh,
present?
sorry,
that's
so we have a butter
great
safe
idea.
for this project?
Anybody that wants to speak or ask questions, just, all we ask is that you come up, if you want to speak, no problem, just come up to the table where there's a microphone and identify yourself, because we are on TV and everybody wants to see you. All your neighbors want to see you on TV. It's no problem, just have a seat and just identify yourself and ask away.
Sure. My name is Steven Stabile, and I live at 265 Webster Woods Lane. My wife and I's lot are adjacent to this project. And I guess one question I have, and some of it might be just because we got invited to this meeting, and I know this is still in approval stage right now, is that correct? So you answered the question regarding septic versus town water and sewer. I noticed these excavators there this summer, and they were like right on the property line within that buffer, that 100-foot buffer, digging away. Is that what they're supposed to be doing? Does it matter where they dig?
They were not, at the wetland behind you, they were more than 100 feet from that. From what I saw on site, they were not.
Because the
No.
stone wall seems to be the property line, at least I thought.
They could have been
were
up
right
there, but they were, from what I saw on the site, were largely on the slope in between the
Right.
buffer zone.
And what is the, I guess, what is the cut law, or, like, in other words, can they cut within that buffer too, or is that something that they're not supposed to disturb at all?
You talking about trees?
Yeah,
Within
trees
100
and things
feet?
like that. Are they allowed to cut trees and things, or?
We'll let Jen field that question, she's our scientist.
So within the 100-foot buffer zone, yes, they can do work. There's a 25-foot no disturb zone and a 50-foot no build zone. Those are the restrictions on the lot. They've already asked for a waiver technically, although they may not need it of the 50-foot, depending on what they do in that area. You can put some pavement, those sorts of things. So yes,
Okay.
the problem with what abuts your property is that delineation is old.
Right.
And we've asked them to seek permission to potentially renew
So
what the
none of the
wetland
wetlands
is.
that are on the private properties that she was saying have been
Right.
flagged by anybody or?
They were flagged, they pulled the flagging from the years
From the
in
old-
which.
from the old
right,
ones,
but
okay.
it
So
would,
they
it would
could
be
have changed.
ideal if they could update them. What Maureen and I noticed when we were in the field is that they're largely topographically driven. Those hills
Mhm.
kind of decide where the
Right.
wetlands are, so it's unlikely that they've been changed over time dramatically.
Okay. And then, what was my other question was, just on the plan itself, you know, I was just wondering why these driveways, and again, this might have nothing to do with you guys because it's still in approval stage, have to be so far back, or, you know, like, especially on lot 1 and 2, is there any way to push them closer to Salem Street or further away from these buffers, or does it really matter? I mean, I guess if it's
Just
outside
speaking,
of the buffers, it
it's
really
outside of
doesn't
the buffer
matter.
zone, so it
They can
really
do whatever
isn't
they
the
wanna
commission's
do.
concern, but I'm
Right.
guessing it's very topographically driven. So whenever the land goes up and then flattens out even the slightest bit, it makes a better home site. If you look at the topography of what's on these plans, you'll
Right.
notice there's largely a flat area and then a steep slope,
Right.
and then a flat area and then a steep slope. So they're just picking the level home site to develop.
Okay. I don't think I have anything else. And if it does become approved and there is like ledge and things like that with blasting, is that something that we're notified of and prior to any kind of blasting?
Any hearings that concern the site
Yep.
that are outside of this hearing, so if the planning board's hearing something, you will again be notified. I'm guessing the planning board hearing notices have already gone out.
I would assume so. I don't do that, so.
Right, so it's 300 feet, so if you were notified 300 feet from the Conservation Commission's, then you'd be notified for 300 feet from the planning board's
I don't
hearings
think
as
that
well.
was Steve's question. Steve, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Did you go to Andover High School?
No, but there's another Steve to be on
Different
town.
story. I'm sorry about that. You're much younger than me. Yours was regarding
What, Mike Chickers?
blasting. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yours was regarding blasting.
Yes,
So
yeah.
blasting is actually heard under the Massachusetts Fire Prevention Office, the Chief Fire Marshal's Office. So those rules and regulations are through that, and they have
Yeah.
their own separate rules. So when they're getting down to blasting, there's very defined regulations that are outside of our own purview,
Right.
that are done by the state. And, you know, with certain distances and seismic requirements and monitoring and pre-blast surveys, completely outside of what we'd be involved in. And there'd be no other hearing. If they need to blast, through the local fire chief, through the fire marshal's office, that permit's issued. You'll get notices if you are within a certain distance. By right, you'll get that notice. And that, if you're beyond that, you won't get notice. You may never know about it you might feel that little rumble.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I guess.
You're not
the-
supposed to feel it, by the way. If you didn't get the notice, you shouldn't feel it.
Okay, I guess the other thing too is I know we live off of the long right-of-way and down in the back, probably like that drive you were talking about plowing. You know, the surveyors and things like that were just running around down the driveway and doing whatever they need to do. So, I mean, as long as they give us some notice or whatever, that's fine.
Surveyors have some rights off property. I don't know exactly what they are, because I'm not a surveyor,
Yeah.
but they shouldn't be running down your
Well,
driveway.
we're just so private back there that when somebody comes down there, it's like, hey.
I think it's
you
something
know,
like 50
If we get a trick or
feet
treat,
out
we
of
actually
the
reward them.
Professional
$100,
courtesy
no.
on either side of the property line itself,
Right.
not
Yeah,
to traverse.
So-
the property.
Traverse your
Most of
property.
your concerns are gonna be with planning.
okay. Yeah, I assume so. That's why I didn't know exactly why we were here, but I think if we know what the buffer is, then that's probably the most important part, so. There is a lot of wetness, because underneath that right away, there's.
Well, and if you
culvert
are
and
one
stuff like
of the
that.
property owners who are contacted to delineate the off-site wetland, and you do permit it, I would accompany whoever comes out to the
Okay.
site to review that wetland delineation, so.
Okay.
And they would be more interested in the backside of the wetland, so they're not going to be delineating what affects your house. They're going to be delineating what affects this property.
Right.
And we would be clear about that. If you granted permission to delineate the wetland, you could only grant permission to delineate the backside that affects the adjacent property and not your own.
Okay. That's all
You
I
can
have.
have this if you want
Oh,
it.
that would be great.
Not a problem.
Excellent, thank you very much. All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Do we have any others?
I was curious what's going on. Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
All right, so we need a motion to continue.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous.
When's the planning board meeting? The 15th?
I think so.
And we're the 16th, so maybe we'll have a better idea.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next one is going to be 2420, file number BP 114 and 125.
All right. Now that's a tripod.
Looking for a smaller one.
It's one of those construction signs, of course. Very interesting.
OSHA compliant and
Don't pinch your finger.
I don't see any safety straps. Safety chains.
might be a little too high for
I think that
I'm
you
gonna- I
need
think-
to get your safety chains in order.
I think for this, I'm gonna go to the, their sort of overview aerial and, which is that, and then I will, leave the actual permitting plans to the easel. I can get this to appear at some sort of relative scale. Oh, this is so frustrating. Well, the good news is, town hall's finished and we'll be back there soon. All right, attachment A isn't in my filing, so we'll go with this.
This is why Bill Belichick tossed his little
The
pen.
surface, I am not
This is
gonna
exactly
toss my
why-
MacBook across the
This is the
room,
exact
I'm
reason
sorry.
why guys my age get frustrated with these things.
You meant
We
it too,
tossed-
man. Yeah.
All right,
Oh, that's much better, thank you.
yep.
That's awesome, Jim.
I think I'm having a stroke.
You see what I'm saying?
I'm not Belichick, so this is gonna go a little smoother.
You want to stand in, somebody to toss it for you?
This is mine, so,
So, okay, then we'll leave yours alone.
If
we have a team pad somewhere?
yeah.
So we're gonna use that on the easel, right?
Yeah, so the presentation before you is tonight is for, I'm sure you've all seen the new crosswalk from Merrimack College to Royal Crest. And along with that is now a sidewalk and pedestrian improvement proposal. It's pretty extensive, so I'm gonna let the consultants present it to you. But just to say that I did review the additional wetland they delineated, sort of in the it's the blue line on the sort of, if you consider the top north and the bottom south, which is not entirely true, but close.
That's behind Volpe?
Yes, it's the wetland behind Volpe, which they
Okay.
expanded the delineation to be the backside of. So that is the jurisdictional Mass state wetlands. As usual, Mass DOT is not filing under the local bylaw, but they have represented that they would acknowledge that there are off-site IVWs jurisdictional to the commission, which are on the Royal Crest property, in which this property would affect, and are shown in very light blue outlines.
Actually, I have.
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah, it'll make it easier.
On the plan. So, so they are acknowledged and they are out there, and this proposal does provide some treatment and things that will affect them. So with that said, I'll let the entire proposal
Okay.
move forward.
So, my name's Meredith Avery from VHB.
I'm Jeff Ketteritz with VHB as well.
So I'm the environmental scientist. We're here on behalf of Mass DOT for the project. As your agent explained, this is sort of a phase 2 of a safety improvement project that's related to this, roadway that gets a lot of foot traffic and a lot of crossing for people who are utilizing Merrimack College and Royal Crest. So the phase 1 was the traffic light. This is phase 2, getting some sidewalks in to improve the safety along the roadway. So Mass DOT is proposing to construct a sidewalk to the north. So yeah, this is north, south, and east that way. Sidewalk to the north and to the south up to Walsh Way. So the sidewalk will sort of end at this entrance to the college, but will continue just past the Route 125 turn on the north side. We did walk the site. I looked at the jurisdictional areas to the north that are locally jurisdictional. And I understand the issues, as your agent has represented them, are mostly making sure that we can control some of the sediment coming off of these paved areas, control the peak discharge so that you can control some of the erosion that's going on the side of the road there. And also make sure that we're not robbing the wetlands of their water. So we're making sure that there's consistent hydrology, but that we capture that first flush, slow it down a little bit, capture it so we can get some sediment out of the stormwater runoff before it gets to the wetlands, but continue to allow that sheet flow to go into those areas so that we don't change the hydrology and the resources themselves. So although MassDOT is not sort of subject to those bylaws, they're really trying to make sure that they comply with the spirit of the bylaw by providing those. To the south, there is a state jurisdictional wetland. We are working within a very close envelope. That's partly because of the ADA requirements of the project, to make sure that we are fully compliant with ADA. There will be no wetland impacts. We have pulled back our outlet so that it's not actually in the wetland. It's just outside the wetland area. We'll make sure that the hay bales are ringing the work area prior to any ground disturbance out there, to make sure we have a good barrier so that the wetland's not affected. It's a pretty minor shift of a head wall that's already out there to accommodate that widening so that we can provide a sidewalk on that side. On the south side, there is a ditch that starts about here.
Yeah, about halfway there.
Okay. So there is kind of an open drainage ditch. There's country drainage that comes off of that side of the road right now. We want to make sure that we're not interrupting that with the new sidewalk. So the sidewalk has been placed on the outside of that. So if you can see, it's sort of set away from the road a little bit on the south side. That's why, so that ditch can continue to function. The ditch will maintain its hydrologic outlet to the wetland. That's part of why we want that connection to stay underneath Walsh Way, so that we can make sure that the water that's sheet flowing off, coming towards the resource now, continues to get to that resource. Although we couldn't find the outlet when we were out there, so how much it's getting right now is a little suspect, but that's what it's intended to do. So we're going to continue to have the drainage patterns exist as they exist today and not interrupt that flow. What am I missing? Do you want to talk about the actual drainage?
The drainage patterns, yeah.
So just going to talk to you a little bit about sort of the way in which we're capturing the runoff and what that's going to do for the resources.
Just to give you a real quick rundown, so that the current roadway drains in essentially two different patterns. The western or northern portion of it has a curved roadway edge, and it's a closed drainage system with catch basins and piped out into the town system further down, and that's going to be maintained operationally now with the introduction of the sidewalk and the curb. That drainage will continue to function as it currently does. Closer to where we're looking in the wetland, as Meredith mentioned, currently the runoff sheet flows from the road into existing swales, both on the Royal Crest and the campus side. So our intent is really to maintain that drainage pattern. And in order to achieve that, what we're doing on the Royal Crest side specifically, by introducing a vertical curb at the roadway edge, to keep the sheet flow going, we've proposed a series of sidewalk inlets, essentially to allow runoff to flow through under a precast section of sidewalk to some stabilized stone, and then through that we would go to a shallow depression for settling and infiltration to provide treatment for that first flush, some peak flow mitigation, but really to mimic the existing drainage pattern as out there now to the maximum extent practical or possible.
I do want to show you a quick,
Flip that
yeah,
over.
I'll give you a little look at that. This might be a little easier to read. So this is zooming in on the Walshway entrance here from the college. Volpe's down here. This is 114, the Royal Crest side over here. So these hatch boundaries here are the locally jurisdictional wetlands Jennifer was talking about on the Royal Crest side. This blue here is the wetland, the flagged wetland boundary on the campus side, and these are associated 25-foot, 50-foot, and 100-foot buffer zones. So the work within this area, everything within the 100 buffer zone flagged, is the extension of the sidewalk, as Meredith mentioned, for the crossing here, limited as much as possible within the ADA standards to provide a refuge on the other side of the road, and stabilization of the head wall and flared end in the existing wetland. And similarly, on the other side of the street, there's also a portion of the new sidewalk and vertical curb to set adjacent to the roadway that falls within that zone as well. We've proposed essentially a series of 4 of these basins to help mitigate peak flows, but provide some water quality and the ability for that first flush of sediment to really settle before we're discharging it. And what we're looking to do is really pick up more of the existing roadway drainage. You know, the sidewalk is what we're introducing as a new impervious, but you know, more of the debris that we're collecting is going to come from the roadways anyway, so we'd like to use that as what we're capturing. So there's a series of these breaks in the sidewalk to allow that sheet flow as the gradient comes down the road into these shallow settling basins. There's about 4 of them on the Royal Crest side, and the campus side we're showing 2 just upstream of that outlet to the wetland system here. So that's a general overview, but we'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have.
So just as a beginning, I asked the town engineer to look at the plan, because he did come out with Meredith and I to look at the proposal, and they've been involved in meetings along the way. He suggested, just preliminarily, that the swales, given that the wetlands, the isolated wetlands, the locally jurisdictional wetlands are largely on the other side of these swales, that they be enlarged somewhat, maybe lengthened, and I think we agreed that in the field that was a possibility, just to provide for a little more storage capacity. I mean, with the intensity of storms increasing, and it doesn't, you know, they're in size to take that first flush, but it would be nice, especially knowing Royal Crest already has its own drainage problems, that they could hold a little bit more before they overtopped. And the only other suggestion, in having a conversation with him this afternoon, is that I didn't get the stormwater checklist, the Mass DEP.
Yeah, we can certainly.
Okay, and one of the things that would have been triggered by that is some kind of O&M plan. I'm sure the state has an overall O&M that they're required to, but it just sort of, you know, something that we could put with this order that says this is the maintenance requirement, even if it's a standard blurb as to how they maintain, you know, how often they're inspected, how often they're cleaned out, and because they're not going to function if they're, I mean, if you look at the photos, there's a large amount of sand that comes off of Route 114, and if that continues to go into these swales, they fill up, they're not going to function. So cleaning is going to be an important part of how this all operates. So with that.
Jack?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have a number, so obviously we're going to continue tonight. But I think, I mean, to me, this looks like, you know, stormwater management all the way, and I just ask you to cooperate with our town engineer, and any suggestions and requirements from the third-party reviewers. All set.
Just wanted to know how long the sidewalks are gonna be from end to end?
It's about, I want to say it's about 3,500 feet from the Andover Street intersection down to 510, which is the, down to the office park here.
Okay.
Is about 3,500.
Okay, and that will be on both sides?
No.
It's the Walshway on the
On
south.
the Royal Crest side.
Stop.
Kimber side would just be here.
On the Royal Crest side, you can get to Starbucks.
Okay. Very good.
Just to reflect on what Jen said on the maintenance, because there's a lot of salt and sand that comes from plowing and just general traffic on that. So the maintenance plan on this particular project would be, I think, very important. Aside from that, I think it's a good project, it's approvable. It's just safety reason. I'm not too crazy about the blinking red light.
It's working great.
It's confusing, yeah.
Who's going, who's
I was
stopping?
more horrified by the kids darting across the road all over the place. It's much, much, much safer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's all I have right now. Joe?
So again, I just prefaced, the safety improvements are absolutely necessary, and everybody's going in the right direction, so we're gonna try to obviously work with that. But what we do have out there is country drainage on both sides. There is no berm, there is no road edge anywhere, so as clean or as dirty as it is, it's all getting off the edge of the road pretty gradually, sitting on the shoulder, getting a little bit muddy, finding its way into Royal Crest property. It sits there and either evaporates or slowly soaks in. But nonetheless, on a country basis, non-point source. So now you're creating solid edge, and you're gonna be putting these areas, and you're creating multiple point sources, and you need to get the water off the road, so I know that. So I think it's more than just get it off the road, and I think some real thought needs to be, recognize what sort of pollution streams coming with it, whether it's suspended solids, like litter, or turbid solids, like silts, that need to be settled out in 4 bays in some sort of deliberate structure, as opposed to just simply get it across the sidewalk and get it off the highway. Because I'm not, again, we're only getting a very initial review, but I think that sort of thought's very important on the Royal Crest side. Not so much concerned on the college side itself, because it's just a lot of topographic relief. You've got some verticality there where you can get the water off and confine it to a swale. But I think, again, some thoughts of where you can find those outlet points, and where you can find, through sediment 4 bays or whatever, where it is you can focus most of your stilling out of the materials, and then let cleaner materials meander their way down through the swale, treat in the swale, and then discharge to the wetland. That's the sort of stuff I think we ultimately need to see. I don't know if that's I don't know what sort of construction document, this is gonna be bid, Mass Highway's not building it on their own, so there's gonna be some sort of construction document that needs to be part of this filing. Maybe it already is.
It is. There's detailed plans that are in the electronic filing that you got, and I had emailed you today separately, because I think we have 3 weeks to the next meeting. Maybe you can go through those, because there is some detail, and maybe you'd like to see more, and, a 4 bay to the swale, especially if you're lengthening the swale, is maybe a possibility.
I think the goal there, particularly with, that was the initial goal to take, exactly what you said. We have this long stretch of road that flows continuous across now, and by introducing this curve, we picked, 6 intervals in between that we're now collecting it. The kind of first step in the comment of adding these basins allowed us an opportunity to create almost a level spreader approach, that we could take these point sources and especially by narrowing or extending out these basins, really grade out that low flow, kind of a very broad, long crested weir that would get us back to that original level spreader type dissipation.
So the limit of roadway edge pavement now on the Royal Crest side is where it is. The additional sidewalks can be added behind that.
Mm-hmm.
How much more, which would still be undisturbed area, if you will, how much right-of-way do you have before you hit the Royal Crest property from the proposed sidewalk limits?
We're there, pretty much. Yeah, we
probably about.
We're within the highway layout for the sidewalk and the swales.
Yeah.
There's some minimal amount of grading, I think, that has to.
But there's not much right of way beyond that?
Particularly on the
We probably have
Merrimack side.
8 to 10 feet. So we are trying to use as much of that as possible for these basins, and we can certainly,
You almost have to
stress
run
that
them
out.
parallel
That's
back to
right.
let
We're
it
gonna have to
drain out.
lengthen them this way, yeah,
Right.
not that way, exactly, because we are up at the edge of the layout, so they would get lengthened along the length of the roadway.
Which seems like it'd be most conducive to leveling things
Yeah.
off.
Jen, you alluded earlier about, someone mentioned Royal Crest has their own drainage problems unto themselves. We know that, as does Berkeley, which is our problem in the town, but it all seems to come
Go
off the
with them.
highway into Royal Crest and down towards Berkeley and ultimately overwhelms Becky's Pond down on 133. But all of that together is, does it make any sense that VHB at least reach out to the Royal Crest engineer, and maybe they already have?
I think you tried to contact Ken, is that what you said, or maybe the town did? Someone had told me today that they had been trying to contact Cornerstone to have this discussion. I think the wetlands on the front of the property are not hugely part of the drainage issue, mostly because,
It's not near their buildings.
well, right, and plus everything comes off the back hill down onto Royal Crest, and then has a hard time funneling through Royal Crest, flooding Royal Crest, ultimately hitting that state highway system and being sent down to Berkeley and then across to Becky's Pond. But on the front of the site, the bigger concern is that those wet areas are between a roadway and the roadway. So the Royal Crest roadway, the isolated wetlands, it's just more water on their property. So if you drive by in the spring, those look like ponds, but they're not actually connected to any of the structures, and I don't think, for the most part, that they contribute to the flooding aspect. The flooding aspect comes from above and onto, but more water on the property is more water on the property. But the water was already coming off of 114, it was just sheet flowing
It's
there.
getting there in a different way.
Right, so now we're gonna
Now it's
confine
gonna-
it, right.
Now it's multiple pockets along, and now we're gonna have fewer pockets, but the same amount of volume just concentrating in areas. I would just hate to not consider that impact on what Royal Crest.
So they've been
is
involved
doing.
in the discussions. I know they have, just from, because the town was involved, VHB was involved, Merrimack College was involved. Everybody's been involved in the discussion. I don't think no one's expressed complaints about what's happening, just trying to make it the best project possible. So I think as long as we're considering all of the, we can make sure that, if you want a letter from Royal Crest saying they understand what's gonna happen and they're in favor, I'm not quite sure. But their engineer, to my knowledge, has not seen the plans.
That would be helpful to have something in the file, just to let them know they're acknowledging that, these stormwater conditions are the result of safety improvements, which, certainly benefits their operation. It's to get their tenants across a dangerous highway.
Right.
By the same token, that we can hold our heads high and say, look, it's the same amount of water, it's just getting there a little differently.
I think if anything, it's gonna improve it.
Yeah, I think so too. It's the peak rate is gonna be, it's gonna take that first flush and slow it down at least a little bit. And it's
Well, I
certainly
mean-
not adding anything to their property that isn't going there right now.
So I'm looking at your blue little shapes, the local wetland areas.
Yeah.
But, those of us who live in the area, and we see it like last Friday night, and
Yeah,
probably
I can
tomorrow,
imagine.
probably
Yeah.
Friday morning this week.
Yeah. You
after
can see how the depression.
No, like the
sits
driveway
right there.
entrance where the pedestrian crossing currently is, the new one now is.
Oh, yeah,
I mean, that driveway is
Sits here.
standing water, 4 or 5 inches of
Wow.
water, as it is now. And,
Well, we can certainly, we can send a copy of the NOI and the plans to them certified mail and give you the receipt of the certification proving that, they've gotten it, they've received the information. And then, if they have any issues, they can certainly bring them up, but that way at least they've received it.
have you had conversations? Vania, representing Aimco, has been with us for the past 4 years.
I want to
on
say,
our project.
DPW told me today that they reached out to Cornerstone and didn't, I know, you don't know, or you do, you haven't reached out, so.
I reached out to Royal Crest, we've talked to Royal Crest themselves. They're aware of the project, they're aware of that we're.
So Royal Crest is, their engineer, maybe not, So I'm not sure whether you're looking for Royal Crest acknowledgement or that they've looked at it from an engineering perspective.
If they've been notified as abutters?
There is no better notification for
So
Mass
let's take Mass
DOT.
Highway off the table, let's take Royal Crest off the table. What we have is, within jurisdiction, we have a stormwater management alteration because of the sidewalk. The sidewalk's the project, but you're changing alterations. Truth be told, it requires a pre and post stormwater analysis. We're trying to not make them go to that level of detail.
Well,
but
they
at the same
have.
token-
They've done there's a stormwater analysis in there. That's why I was looking for the checklist, because I wasn't sure that all the boxes had been checked, but there is some stormwater analysis done in the NOI.
Okay.
And we can provide the checklist in a matter of days, right? I mean, it's not
Yeah,
gonna
we
take
can,
very
you know,
long.
I think specifically the pre-post was, we had included a brief narrative addressing the water quality. We can certainly,
It's only for the sidewalk, right? Because that's the only new
Clarification.
impervious area. It's not analysis of the whole roadway system, because that's not new.
Well, without having the actual watersheds in front of me, so what used to be water flowing down off the edge of the roadway onto the shoulder and off the shoulder
Right.
into the property was more gradual, more dispersed. What you're doing now is you're collecting that all, same amount of water from the roadway, channelizing it by putting a barrier called a gutter in, berm, and you're going to allow it to bleed out at point sources. It's going to be different in a peak fashion at each of those locations. It's going to be. And there's no denying that. The question is does that create a problem or not, or does it make things better, or does it in fact equal out the way it was?
and we can certainly look at it and follow, you know, I think with these, what we can make sure to include on the detail of these basins is, you know, certainly what we're gonna get now is an opportunity to capture that sediment where before it was either sitting on the road, kinda like it is now, or draining off into the ditch. So certainly will help with capturing that and with the peak flows, but as far as the disbursement of it, it's obviously never gonna get to that point that it is now where it's lateral on the entire stretch. But what we can do is to the maximum extent possible, mimic that.
That dispersion, once it leaves the point.
Right, right. You know, the best way is probably for us to make sure that the grading detail on these shallow depressions has an even overflow from that settling area, so that it's, at least what's leaving that long stretch of storage is as even as possible, without introducing any kind of channels for erosion, right?
So, Neil, you know, all of my comments are based on this and that, and not that at all. And so I didn't realize there were, you know, more documents submitted, so I do ask that I get a chance to look.
I
at
emailed
those.
them all to you today.
Yeah, it was,
Sorry.
no phone calls.
I do send and I do send the link. I mean, you guys get it a couple days ahead of time. I know it's not always enough time to review, but we try to get it out there.
I have a couple of questions, and it may not be conservation related as much. Are you widening 114?
No, this is,
There's a dotted line on the college side. Is that the right of way now?
I think
there's fencing and,
That's supposed to be a fence.
that will be on the college, property.
It's gonna be a fence?
Yes, yeah,
The fence is gonna be on the college property?
I believe so.
Is the sidewalk gonna be on the college property?
Now, the sidewalk will be completely in the right of way, save for, a couple of the connections to the campus shown.
Now, another thing, what those sidewalks that you seem to be going on to private property?
Those are college
college,
projects.
Yeah, this is all the college campus here.
Well, I understand it's a college
And
campus,
everything on,
but the sidewalk that you're putting in that's on 114, that runs parallel to 114, that's not on college.
that's in the right of way.
It's within the right of way of the
Correct.
street. But then you've got lines that go into the college. A couple of them, or 3 of them on the college side and one on
Correct.
the other side of the street. What's the purpose of those?
That's to introduce connections, you know, this one particularly is the current phase of the crossing was intended to provide a connection point from the campus to the students on the Royal Crest development. And the intention was to really give what we didn't want to do is create this sidewalk without destinations. We don't want to.
Yeah, but you have destinations at the road. You got the Walsh Way going out there that connects to it, and you got the other driveway out that connects to it on the other side.
On
down
the
there.
side,
Why
correct.
do you need these others going out? It's paying, spending taxpayers' money on private property.
This piece here,
Yeah.
Yeah, there's one there. By the, it says Route 114, just under that. You got a line that goes down, that extends significantly onto the college property, then you got one up further at the end of the street, connects onto the college property, and then you got the one at Walsh Way that connects on it. Then across the street, you got spending taxpayers' money on private property.
this was,
Can I just interject? I'm Felipe Schwartz from Merrimack College. This is actually a public-private partnership. So actually the college is spending money on this project as well. For example, the college paid for the crosswalk and its sidewalks entirely so far, so we're contributing to the project as well as the state is. So it's not an entirely public project.
What about the college pay for the one on the other side of the street?
Yeah, that entire red line you see there, that's all college paid for.
Yeah, Felipe, that's, I've been watching the growth of the college for a long time and impressed, and you know, my brother's an alum, and lots of my uncles were as well, but I've been horrified over the past 5, 6, 7 years, seeing the growth incrementally getting so bad that your housing was forced, the kids' housing near the college were forced across the street, and at great peril, you know, sometimes having to jam on my brakes at night as these idiots, trying to get home, or trying to go to Fuddruckers, or trying to go to the drugstore. So clearly the need is there, clearly. So very impressed with the new signals, and the need for it was absolute, and very impressed with it. But you just look at knuckleheads who are still crossing the street outside of the pedestrian area.
We do. Yeah,
So I don't know if, to Doug's point is, are you collecting the kids, the knuckleheads, into an area and getting them out to the sidewalk in focused locations so that they're better likely to use that sidewalk without darting across the street?
Yeah, that was a pedestrian study done before we did the crosswalk. So we saw where the kids were crossing. And you're right, they're crossing in different parts, but for the most part, they're crossing here because when they come across, this is pretty much the heart of the academic campus side of it.
Mm-hmm.
What we're finding now, though, interestingly enough, is the non-Merrimack residents of Royal Crest are coming across. Now they see like, hey, there's an opportunity to cross safer. You know, now I can come onto campus and walk my dog, or I can go for a walk. I can walk all the way to Andover. I can walk to, you know, Chipotle and the whole plaza there. So, and I think what you see pedestrians, not even college kids, you see pedestrians walking this corner to go to work in the office buildings, you know, on the other side of Rite. So it's an interesting experiment right now in terms of who's using the crosswalk and how it's being used. For the most part, we see people using it at the right location. How the fencing happens over time, I think that's going to be something we'll want to monitor in the type of fence. But it's, you know, I appreciate the time you guys are taking to review this. This is an exciting part for us. I think having the town involved, the town manager's been involved on the whole thing, and it's great that the engineer went for the walk as well, because I think he provides great insight into the project too.
if I can piggyback on that, I apologize for not mentioning sooner, but in response to the similar comments John had, we actually, if I can bring out one more sketch here, we haven't sent this around, but we just pulled together based on essays. This is just a quick sketch of something to address that we could do in expanding those basins as well, and might give a better look at leveling out those areas from the single catch or sidewalk inlets there.
Okay, that was exactly the width of my right-of-way question. That helps explain a lot better.
We'd like that on these, apologize, I didn't have it out sooner.
I
We're
just-
ready to continue, Tom.
We need to continue it.
Yeah, we do.
One more question before you do that. I just want to get back, we were talking about whether or not Royal Crest was aware. There were no abutter notifications made. Yeah, I understand you're exempt, that's why they weren't done. So what I would like you to do is notify your biggest abutter there. Send them a copy. You had suggested you wouldn't mind sending it. So if you would kindly do that, I'd feel better if they just were, we knew they were aware.
This is a public-private partnership, does that change the exemption status? Yes, it does.
No, because they're the applicant.
By convenience or by reality?
Well,
All roads lead to Rome, Joe.
it is, let's put it this way, it is the state's land.
Okay.
If I could just add one.
And the state's actually ultimately going to bid it and construct it and have it constructed.
That's my understanding.
Yeah. Fair enough.
So we need a motion to continue.
I don't know that there are any abutters.
Oh, we have abutters? No,
I don't know,
no.
but I'm just saying.
Just tell them. You are an abutter to Merrimack College?
I gotta buy it every
By default, abutter by default.
One more traffic light to do.
All right.
No questions? Okay.
Okay, so motion to continue?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
11:16.
16, okay.
16.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jim, was that an
Who
additional
noticed?
copy?
Yes, you can have that copy. I did send it to you electronically.
Yeah.
Who motioned and I didn't get that. Deb, Al?
Go with that.
We'll go with that. It's been a Deb, Al kind of night.
Go with it.
We don't put it, let's see if they get back.
Put on your OSHA safety belt before you.
You're hot at it.
I'm going to leave this here until next time.
That's always the prudent move, right there. There it is.
My car,
Yeah, just
You
move.
have a crane to take it with you.
Someone removed one of our cables, so I wouldn't leave it.
All right, we have a general business, we have,
Do we want to go back to our other matter, or do
Thank you very much.
we want to?
Do we have anybody left in the
I
room?
think we have Gray Street, correct? We're at 169 Gray Street.
get
is
Gray Street out of
Yeah,
the way.
Present in the
let's
room.
clear that.
all right, 242-1507, COC request for 169 Gray Street.
So, they've been working very diligently to get this ready for today. The one, you can call it major or minor issue, let me pull up the, is that their engineer did not put their stone wall on the plan. And we contacted that engineer today to send us a plan with the stone wall on it, and he put a stone wall on it, but it isn't your stone wall. That's all I have to say about that. So we still have a plan without the stone wall on it. I'm going to try to bring up that plan. Well, the minor guess is that who said engineer might be. None of them to be stated out loud.
No need.
No need.
No need.
No need.
There we go.
We've only lost two.
You know, when you want something to enlarge, you can't get it enlarged.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right,
This isn't gonna be great, but it's the best we can do. But look at that, lots of black lines on the plan. The only, Heidi had pointed out that this was for a pool. The pool patio did enlarge slightly over what was proposed, but it is outside the 50-foot no-build zone. The pool equipment was located slightly farther away than was proposed. And the 25-foot no-disturb wall was installed, marked as of today, right? And a brush pile that was in the no-disturb zone was removed. So everything is in compliance. The question becomes, what do we do about the plan? Do we issue the COC and hold it for the wall? Do we draw the wall in? Heidi had made some suggestions in here, but
have you contacted them?
yeah, and that's why Heidi was shocked that right away we got a new wall plan back, but she looked at the plan and she said,
An ongoing.
that's not our stone wall.
They just sketched it in.
They just put a stone wall on the plan at the 25, but that's not where the stone wall
But
is.
oops, I should have probably checked in the field first.
Well, or surveyed it, but, you know, we're not trying to hold you up, but typically what we would require in this particular situation is, well, they can vote an issue, given that we have, that the project was largely constructed in compliance, but the fact that there's something missing from the plan means we'll wait for the plan to come in before we pass you that piece of paper to go record.
Okay.
So as long as that isn't holding up some kind of other
No, I mean,
financial
everything's
transaction.
been done except for,
You don't have any other transaction, like a refi or a sale or anything that this is holding up? That
no.
You're just trying to get into
Clean,
compliance?
just trying to close out
We
the
just
order.
want it done,
All
so we,
right, okay.
and done,
And we still, do we have some of your money too?
yes.
I'm sure Fran would like that.
Yeah.
So when we get the plan and we get the, issue the COC, the bond would automatically be released.
Okay.
I don't think it's an issue, we just get the plan.
Yeah.
Show the wall on the plan.
That's really, I think, I
That's
agree
it.
with you, that's all it is. That's all it is, I agree.
But this is the same, you know, engineer who's holding up the Merrimack condominiums plan since January. So that's my only caveat
Well-
is,
He doesn't know Fran.
But that's
between those two.
between them and the engineer.
Right.
Do we want to,
So close issue and hold for receipt of the plan.
that sounds good to me. I'll move that. I'll second it.
Alan, Deb.
For discussion, is the wall in the right place? The boulder wall
Yes,
that's on the 25?
yes.
Physically on the ground it is.
Physically
It's
on the
just not
ground
on
it
the
is,
plan.
not on the plan.
Okay.
You meant on the ground, right?
I did mean
You
on the
meant,
ground.
your question was, is it on the right?
There's no question, it's
know.
there in compliance.
Just making sure.
No, Jack wanted, that's good.
There was a question mark on the recommendations.
Just to note, there was a small piece of the patio that was not in compliance and it was removed. So that's already been addressed.
So good. All right, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. So, talk to him and.
Get us that plan. Actually, I think Heidi's working on it. I think she followed up on the email after receiving that plan.
Oh, okay, yeah, because the last thing I heard from her was she had gotten it, so.
Okay, we'll follow up with you.
Thank you
Thanks.
very much.
Thank you.
See you tonight.
Okay, we have some continuances. We have 0 Riverview Street, request to continue to 11/6/15.
16.
11/16.
11/16.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. We have 242-1169, request to continue to 11/16.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that's unanimous. And 242-1667, request to continue to 11/16.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. And now back to
150
150
flagship.
Yeah, flagship.
242 blank, 150 flagship. Mr. Howard.
Mr. Manzi.
How can we help you? Make it as simple, make the request as simple as it can possibly be.
Thank you.
Chronological.
So my request is this, and Jen, jump in if you think I'm wording this incorrectly. My request is that the commission close the public hearing. My request then is for the commission, if you feel so inclined, to issue the framework of an order of conditions tonight. That order of conditions would not be issued by Jen physically until DEP issues its file number. Could be tomorrow, could be 5 days from now, I don't know. I also understand you're working under the 21-day requirement to get a decision out. I would put in writing to the commission that we would waive that 21-day requirement in case for some chance this does get all the way back to your November 16th hearing, past the 21 days. And the only reason I'm asking this is, we've done everything we're supposed to do. I know they've received the check. Our bank shows it's been cleared. But for some bureaucratic reason, I cannot get the file number issued. And this has been going on for a number of weeks now. I think this is a unique circumstance. I don't know why it's happening. I've made a couple phone calls to DEP. I've spoken to the gentleman twice. I had no luck reaching a person today or this week, but we've done everything we can to address this administrative issue. To Joe's point, I understand that it still may be too late to get this project in, depending on when the paving plant's, shut down. But it's not a big project. It's 10 parking spaces, whatever, in the buffer zone. This gives my client a shot, Al, of getting the work done this year. You can imagine how frustrated my client is with me because I'm trying to explain to him that I don't have this number, that I can't get him his permit. These are not pleasant conversations. That's my problem, not yours, but I'm trying to solve the problem, and this would be my proposal to the commission.
Any input?
Can I offer a motion?
Yeah, I guess so. Let's ask, does anybody have any questions?
May not get seconded and offer it. Let's see what it
I
sounds
want to
like.
offer a motion. If it gets
Let's see what
seconded,
it
then we
sounds
can have
like.
discussion.
Yeah.
But I mean, I want to get this thing rolling.
Sure.
I don't want to have breakfast here with you guys. So
I'll get to it, though.
I'm going to move, not that I don't love all of you, but I just don't want to have breakfast here. I move that we close, issue a positive order of conditions, hold that order of conditions for the issuance of a DEP number, and accept the applicant's waiver of the 21-day requirement.
Second.
Now we have something to talk about.
Okay, I would, for one, I would accept his waiver, but require that he provide a written waiver.
In writing, yeah. Look he's offered to do.
I will amend my motion to accept his written waiver.
Require it before
You can write it on.
I'll send Jen an email tonight before I leave.
There's a
if I need
legal
to.
pad behind you, then we'll accept that.
I want the record to be just crystal clear on the uniqueness of the circumstances here, that we have compelling evidence, and I'm hearing it from Mike, but Mike must have shown Jen, that this payment has been cashed by DEP, and that it's bureaucratic error on their end, and therefore is not precedent-setting with regards to, the way this commission does business in the future.
And to that end, I want to also require that the applicant call Charlie and provide evidence of that call.
To the extent Mr. Baker takes my call, I'll
He's
do
in
that as
Swampscott
an outreach.
right now.
It's in Swampscott. He's
I do have to say that
Accepted.
it's not entirely like,
without precedent.
well, it is somewhat without precedent for all of you, but the issue here isn't necessarily the DEP file number. They also, at the last hearing, had other things to provide to us. So you don't, when there are things to be added to the file, technically close an issue. The problem here is we have a 3-week meeting continuance. It isn't our typical we would normally meet again in 2 weeks, and this might not be such a big issue because we could close an issue. But we're now not meeting, given our own schedule because of the Thanksgiving holiday. It's somewhat our issue that we have this huge meeting gap that is literally going to throw off their.
It's a unique circumstance, and the applicant shouldn't be.
I don't really think it's
penalized.
related to the DEP file number, because honestly, they will have a DEP file number by the next time. And if it were a regular 2 meeting, we'd just say, just wait for your DEP file number and we'll close an issue in 2 weeks. But the truth is, we're not meeting in 2 weeks.
That's all Mike's asking. I think it is the DEP file number.
I would agree that the
It isn't,
DEP
but-
is
It's the issue.
part
But we
of the
weren't
big-
ready to close at the last hearing anyway, whether they had that DEP file number or not.
But they're ready to close now.
At the last meeting, they had the DEP file number, and we asked for a couple of things to be shown on the plans, and he came, like he did tonight,
Oh, right.
with those on the plan. We'd have
Right.
closed and had a decision ready to go.
But for
tonight.
that number, we wouldn't be having this
We- we-
conversation.
Well, there's another precedent. We would not have had it ready because Jen moved offices last week, and Jen clearly informed Mike she was not going to write his order of conditions because she
We did
was
have
not
that
capable of doing so.
That's a professional conversation.
No, I'm just saying,
Doesn't
this
need to be
is
part
a
of the
whole
record.
host of issues that's really put this applicant in a bind. But it isn't, let's just not put it on DEP. We've had the file number issue before. It is kind of the perfect storm of 3-week meeting gap, my office moving, no file number. It is a really unique situation that this project isn't moving forward at this point. Because we're going to have other 3-week meeting gaps, we're going to have other non-issuance of DEP numbers. I'm just saying, this is a whole host of issues that just really combine to make this the unique of unique situations. Because I don't think we want any one of those things to be the thing that makes us do this again. Because in my 8 years here, you've never done this.
Well, no,
At the paving schedule, if we waited till the 16th and a decision already written and approved.
And
that
a
would be
10-day
20,
appeal period.
And then 10 day after that?
Right, that's still it.
That'd only give you like
I-
a 2-week paving period. It's usually about the 16th.
I don't know what to do on the management then, or, planning or even construction end of the project, but whatever action this commission has been considering for the past few weeks, this project hasn't changed much. I would hope that they already have their contractor lined up and scheduled, just waiting for that appeal period to expire. If they're waiting for us in order to go out and get pricing and schedule it, if I get it, it's right.
No, exactly. I've been on some of those email trends. She may know more than I do at this point, but they are actively
They're
pressing.
ready to go.
They are, yeah.
Yeah, after last Conservation Commission meeting, the plans were sent out to bid, so, the client has received those feedback.
Thank you. So I would suggest one other thing to make sure this is sort of even better. I mean, our framework for an order of conditions is pretty standard, but I think you should maybe add to your motion that since you've issued a positive order of conditions, that the final conditions will be reviewed with the chair. So we'll sit down, Lou and I can make sure the bond is set where he wants it, that everything we've agreed to incorporate, the O&M, the changes to the O&M, all of that are in this order.
so I move that you add that to my motion.
Mr. Chairman, let the record show I did just put in writing on behalf of my client,
The waiver.
waiving the 21-day requirement.
Okay.
And Jen, I assume that's if you could read my chicken scratch, I assume that's worded to your satisfaction. But if you can't, I can read it.
So it seems
To issue
everybody's
the-
in agreement.
So motion second amended and,
We're still in discussion.
okay.
Like I said, I'll go with the commission, but I'm just very scared about changes when
Well,
it comes to the
This,
future.
the term case-by-case basis is what we operate by.
And I feel for my client, the applicant,
Otherwise, there wouldn't be any need for us here. If we didn't have some discretion in how we administer, then we wouldn't be needed at all. You could just simply go off a checklist, yes, no, and you wouldn't need any commissioners.
Right.
That's the reason we're here.
The other option too is if, say we decided we didn't want to do it, and he would have to request a continuance. If he says, I'm not going to continue this, I want a decision from you guys, I want it now.
He knows better than that.
I do. Let the record show I do know better than
That simply wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
No,
This
but
is
then
the
he
wrong
can
commissioner
force
with a
it.
gun to the head.
Point taken. I do. Yeah, that's the.
Okay, all right, so we have a motion.
20 years of history here.
You have a motion, a second, is that correct?
At least.
You have a motion, a second, and we've had
Aye.
discussion and an amendment.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? That's unanimous.
Thank you, folks. I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, everybody.
So what do we have?
We have
Bonnie
the
Lane.
enforcement order.
We have Bonnie Lane, 123 Bonnie Lane enforcement order.
So Mr. Dawson came to see me today. Mr. Dawson is very eager to comply with the enforcement order. He doesn't want to be the individual on the lake with the lot that stands out.
You mean the one that has no trees at the water line?
Anymore.
Correct. So to his defense, he
You can see a brown
did
pile.
come down with a pile worth of photos. He has had significant beaver damage over the years, and he brought me the beaver chewed trees lying in the lake and lying in his yard. And, he says 100% his bad for cutting them up and taking them away, especially some of them that fell with root balls into the lake. We probably would have left the majority of those for habitat once he cleaned up his yard. There are some other things that have happened down his property that are also sort of outside his control. They were started and done before he fully had a full grasp of his property and what was his property. He does admit to installing the walkway down to the water and understands that you may want to see some of that removed, and he will be at the hearing in 3 weeks to address some of that. He does understand that there was a dock when he got to the property. He has since upgraded that dock. It is seasonal and comes out of the water on an annual basis. He understands that the harbor master and the commission may want to see things done differently with the dock. If the harbor master decides to issue permits for the dock, that's a whole nother discussion that I think should be had with the harbor master and not necessarily this commission. If the dock itself were considered a violation, it's been there more than 3 years beyond his ownership of the property and could probably remain if the harbor master were willing to grant a Chapter 91 license again, or approval under Chapter 91. The bigger issue is that he would like to do the planting of whatever it is, the buffer zone you'd like to see planted on his property immediately, like as in maybe even this weekend, so that he can get to it and start the process within this growing season. I have given him the native plant list, and I think the guidance he would like to seek from you is what kind of buffer zone we're looking at. Are we looking at the 25-foot no disturb? Or it has largely, when you look at the aerial photos, been lawn since the 90s, with more trees obviously at the shoreline. So what he's proposing to do is plant trees, and understands that what's under those trees would be natural no disturb. He could seed it, he could plant some shrubs, he could do whatever, but he wouldn't be disturbing that buffer zone.
Right, so this is optimum planting time.
Right.
They're dormant, so you can't count this as the start of the growing season.
They would be planted, and we'd monitor next spring.
Start the growing season monitoring beginning next
Correct.
spring.
The clock doesn't start, that's right.
Right.
Okay.
Well, it starts as in he put them in, and next season would be the first season to monitor.
Yeah, there's no way to judge survivability. They're asleep.
No, right, and he knows that if he were to monitor them, the first time would be next spring, but he wants to get them in now
Wants to get
and
them in
start
now.
that clock as in my first monitoring. If he plants them next spring, his first monitoring season is next November.
That's what I'm saying.
Right, so he's getting a jump on it by starting now.
I think Joe's saying no. Joe's saying he doesn't want the monitoring season to start in the spring.
Monitoring starts in November.
In November?
They're dormant now, so it's as if he's planted them in the spring, but because there's nothing growing. The first growing season begins in the spring. It's ready for its first monitoring in November.
Oh, okay. I don't think he cares.
Well,
yeah, and I don't either.
I think he wants
As
to
long
get
as
them
he's
in the
clear
ground.
on that.
But
This is the optimum time to plant.
Right.
But he still doesn't start his first monitoring, doesn't start until a year from now.
Till next November.
1 year.
So if
from
they
now.
leaf out in the spring, that doesn't count as his first
No.
monitoring season?
I
It
mean,
just means they leafed out. It doesn't mean.
Planting at this point, well, I suppose it could be a push because
I think,
if they don't,
I don't
if they
think-
don't,
I
if
think
they don't open up in the
generally
spring,
speaking,
he's got to
right,
replace them
he's got to
anyway.
replace them anyway, and the season starts over. So I would say if they leaf out in the spring, that he's got to,
So he's rolling the dice that they might
that
just survive.
they might be fine.
And, he's probably, with the deer browse that goes on out there, he's probably got a 50%
I would
shot.
say in all the years I've done restorations, November 1st is the cutoff for planting. And even then, you're going to get some of smaller species, you'll get frost heave type.
Well, that close to the lake too, the frost
He's
isn't.
doing trees. He can go right up until the frost really gets into the ground.
Right,
I would
that's
say
what I'm
November
saying.
1, yeah.
So if these things turn out to be looking spectacular come spring, he's survived a growing season.
And Joe, you gotta remember too, the closer he gets to the water, the later the frost is gonna get in there. It's not gonna be the same date.
Yeah, I have no problem
as frost.
timing-wise. Do we know what he's planting?
He came into me today with a list, and he had some preferences for things that I don't think will do well that close to the lake. So I gave him a list, and I starred a bunch of things. So I rewrote the enforcement order tonight, and if you were to approve it, it would be that he would plant the 25-foot no disturb zone in the area where it's lawn to the edge of the lake, and that the species would need to be approved by me, as would the plant locations.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. I'm showing good faith.
Right. And that's just starting to address the enforcement order. He realizes there are further things that will be considered when he is president and can discuss them with
Are we
you.
gonna plant trees that are not in their infancy, are they going
No, I think he's
some
going to,
substantial trees?
I've never been down there, but King's Nursery over by Paisley's in
Yeah,
Boxford.
yeah, it's a very nice nursery.
Yeah,
Yes, it
and
is.
so he was very impressed with the.
It's right in the middle of a wetland itself,
Yeah,
actually.
so should be plenty of red
Is that the
maples.
lilac farm?
This the-
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
It's the one at the end
recommend,
of Great Pond Road
Yeah.
at 133, where you're
Yeah.
literally walking out in the water. It's a beautiful place, but you're in the water there.
Yeah.
I recommended silver maple, red maple, any of the willows outside of weeping willow, Alnus rugosa, speckled alder,
They'll get there anyway.
right?
Yeah.
They'll get there anyway, man.
So I think he very eager to comply with the commission's request.
Okay.
So I would make a motion to amend the enforcement order to include the discussion had tonight.
So
What about the
Sorry.
walkway?
No, we can further, he understands he's still, and
And he's coming on.
I put the date now for the rest, for him to attend the meeting to be the 16th of November in that enforcement order. So we
You'll get
continue the
further
rest of the discussion
instructions at
on the
that point.
16th.
Moved and seconded.
Joe, Deb.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous.
All right, do we cover? We jumped all around, I'm not sure. I think we got everything, right?
Motion adjourned?
Second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, and that's unanimous.
We're adjourned, Mr.